Hello and welcome back to our AIM Parenting live stream. Today we're thrilled to welcome someone whose work sits at the intersection of heart, healing, and practical psychology. Calvin Armerding, MA, LPCS, is a senior associate at Traveler Stress Counseling Associates, where he supports adults, couples, and families through some of life's most important challenges. He's the author of The Cooperative Family and the co-creator of the Telos Project, a web-based self-help program designed to help individuals move towards purpose and wholeness.
Calvin also serves as president of the South Carolina Society of Adlerian Psychology and is the co-founder of the Alfred Adler Fellows Program, a postgraduate training initiative that's shaping the next generation of Adlerian practitioners. When he's not helping families grow stronger, you'll find him studying architecture, creating music, and spending quality time with his children. Calvin, welcome. We're so glad to have you here.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me. I'm excited to chat with you all for a bit.
That's really cool, Calvin. So we know that you work so closely with families and you have such a deep understanding of both the theory and the lived reality of parenting yourself. So before we get into some of the practical side of things, we'd love to start here. So in your experience, Calvin, what do you notice about the role that pace plays in family life today? And why do you think so many of us end up in a chronic state of rushing, especially as parents?
What a great question. I think there's a few aspects to this that I want to address. One is just that adults, just with our development, there is a reality of we are faster and bigger and stronger and more capable and perhaps even more decisive sometimes than children are. And that's not any knock on kids. It's just, when you're 3 feet tall, you can't move as fast as somebody who's 6'2", like me. And so there's this thing where it's like, everybody should move at my pace. And it's this weird thing that we get into as people, where this kind of egocentrism, where we think that the world should be made in our image and look like us and talk like us and think like us and act like us and move as fast as us. So there's that aspect. I also want to just mention that I am also talking as an American. I was recently in Bulgaria doing some teaching and training there. And every time that I'm in Europe, I notice how much slower everything goes. Just for instance, you go out to eat at a restaurant, and rather than having the bill shoved at you, like happens in the United States, where they're like, hey, hope you enjoyed your meal. Can you please
move along
your table? You have to ask for the check, and so people just sit around chit-chatting. And so also I think there are cultural elements to this too, where certainly my culture, we highly, highly value efficiency and speed and proficiency and things like this. So I think that also contributes to the milieu in which we're doing some parenting, where we just can get so rushed. We're so focused on speed and pace.
Gosh, that really resonates. I mean, it's that kind of thing where you get to the end of the day and you really do think, where was I? Was I even present?
Yeah.
It's so much of what we do is on autopilot. And when we sort of zoom in on the day to day, what are some of the ways that this constant rushing shows up, would you say, in everyday parenting moments?
Well, I think it creates an enormous amount of power struggle between parents and children, where parents are so focused on, hey, we have to be here at this time, but also we need to do things right up into the moment that we need to leave. And so then we have to move at a certain speed out to the car, and we have to, and we have to get dressed in a certain number of minutes. And so then there's this thing where parents, trying to be on time or trying to use their time wisely, try to force their children to move faster, to go faster, to be more efficient. And of course, children in this regard are no different than parents. People do, and I'm saying in general, people do not like to be made to do things. And that includes, going faster. And so you'll often, if you are ever at an airport and there's a parent who's trying to get a kid to move faster, if you watch, the parent will say, come on, let's go. And immediately the child often will start to walk even slower than they were before. And so there becomes this kind of jostling for a power position of who, can you really make me? No, I'm going to show you that you can't make me.
Yeah, it's so interesting because this is something that we were discussing in our 6-week parenting program. So we deliver it every Tuesday, and we were discussing this yesterday about how children's sense of urgency either like doesn't exist or is just like completely different to ours, right? So like we're trying to get children to do something in 2 minutes when we should actually allow them 10 minutes to do it, right? Because
Absolutely.
again, it's like their pace is completely different to ours. And I think that it's so important for us as adults to appreciate and understand that children are not mini adults. They were, and something like I keep saying all the time, is like people, they were born the other day. Right? They haven't been around for too long. So they're still discovering things, they're still learning how to do things. And like one of the I love this positive discipline tool, which is obviously like completely based on the Adlerian psychology, which is just take time for training, right? And like how can we take time for training if we're always rushing those poor little souls?
I'm reminded also of my friend and colleague Paul Rasmussen had this thing that he would do with folks in an anger management group, which was to say, really, there's no one way that the world should go. There's not a certain, and for the purposes of our conversation today, there's no pace at which kids should be moving.
Yeah.
And if you think there is, like, and by the way, I do this, like I act as if there is actually a pace at which children should be moving. But like if we poke on that even just a little bit, it falls apart very quickly, right? Like there's nothing objective in the world that says, oh, they need to walk, 1.5 miles an hour to the car. There's no rule in nature that says that they need to do that, but we act as if that is the case. And if we can just let that go and let go of some shoulds and create a little bit more breathing room and time, I think that can go a really long way with reducing power struggle between parents and kids.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, sorry, Amanda, would you like to say something?
No, I was just going to bring in the fact that children's sense of time is also in the present moment, right?
Yeah.
So they have no concept of especially young children of what's going to happen, or they're so hyper focused on the now. So that's another I think it's another thing that we kind of forget, and then we think we're failing because we can't get them out the door in 20 minutes or whatever it is,
Right. Yeah.
And I think, like obviously, like we're talking about the family side of like raising children, but obviously, like when you said, oh, there isn't like an actual pace for it. And I was like, okay, the teacher in me immediately was like, but as a teacher,
that's great. Yeah.
We need to get to places like many times a day, and we have to be like bang on time, right? So it's like, although obviously like there shouldn't be a pace, everyone's nature should definitely be respected. And then it's like, how can we convince teachers, especially in the mainstream school system, that like everyone's space should be respected? Because again, it's like we know what a beautiful combination it is when we bring the Adlerian psychology, positive discipline alongside Montessori education. But how about those who go to schools that are mainstream? How can we still implement a respectful relationship, nurture this respectful relationship with children, and still it almost feels like we failed at respecting their pace, their natural pace, because we kind of like have to rush them because, hey, PE is happening in 5 minutes and we need to tidy up, we need to transition. Sometimes it's like crossing, like a whole like football field for you to get from place A to B with children who are like 3-4 year olds with tiny legs who get super distracted on the way.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I say this as a parent whose kids are currently in public school, and by the way, we really like almost comprehensively love this school. They've been really good to our kids. They're getting a great education. They like school, so it's fine. But but there is this kind of, there is like a pace to things and a schedule. And to be fair, I mean, those things, those are realities of life too. And I think one of the things that I would want folks to remember, including myself, is that I think in those moments when we're trying to rush our kids, what we are missing is how much time we end up losing in power struggle, which is massive, right? There are some charter schools that have really invested, Adlerian style charter schools, or I would be interested to hear about whether or not this happens in Montessori. But when kids are having behavioral problems, you stop and you have a class meeting to say,
right then and there,
how do we want to deal with this? And I can just, every time that I mention this to American educators, you can just see their hearts shrivel, right? They're just like, but how are we going to get through the curriculum, And
yes, how are we going to check all the boxes? Oh my God.
And listen, I think that that's really a fair response. I sympathize with that. And I also, my observation of how that turns out is that, okay, yeah, it's inefficient on the front end. And then on the back end, you have this cooperative group who is not constantly dragging their heels every time that they're asked to do something, because they want to show that they have agency and autonomy like every other human being.
Yes, and as they should have, right? Yes.
So we're kind of loaning them our frontal brain, or our frontal lobe of our brain, because we can think out into the future and weigh consequences and make short-term sacrifices for long-term gain, to say, hey, I'm going to make a short-term sacrifice on efficiency so that we can have the long-term benefit of a cooperative dynamic between me and the students, or me and my children, or whatever else.
Another thing we were discussing last night in our empowered parenting course was family meetings. And you can, and often it's kind of like, well, when have I got the time? How am I going to actually kind of like, and we were trying to kind of say, actually, this is going to save you so much time in the long run, and it's because you're giving the children agency and autonomy and a voice, and, to kind of minimize those power struggles. But yeah, I mean, on the kind of more psychological side, what messages do you think we're giving to children? Unintentionally, obviously, by kind of rushing them through the day. What do you think they're kind of, internalizing from that?
Certainly, that's a great question. And I think an important one for parents to remember. I think that there are a lot of, a child will make out of it whatever they're going to, like, they have the capacity to make meaning. And so of course, you can't say for certain what they're going to make out of being rushed by a parent. But often it's, you're too small, you're too slow. And then also sometimes, particularly in certain cultural contexts, it's you're bad. Or like there's a kind of like moralizing of this.
It's like there's something wrong with the child.
Yeah, precisely. You are an annoyance. You are a burden. These are all things. And by the way, I do this, okay? And I don't think that my children are annoyances or burdens. I don't think that they are bad. I don't think that they're incapable. Like, I adore my children. They are my two favorite people on the planet. But I act as if, things have to go at a certain pace. And I don't doubt for a second that part of what I communicate when I rush my kids are these messages. So it's not like bad, evil parents communicate this to their kids because they want to. We communicate it to our kids whether we want to or not, and whether or not we love our kids or we don't. We need to understand that there is impact that transcends our intent in how we choose to parent.
Yeah,
this is so powerful, because as I said, it's like there's so much that we as adults, we think that we're doing, and then the children, they're having a completely different perception of the same reality. And what you said is so true. It's like we're telling those children, you're too small, you're too slow, you're bad, you're an annoyance, you're a burden, you can't do this as quick as I can do, you're not as efficient as I am. Right. So like all of these things, they're obviously sending children a negative message, which is absolutely going to take a toll as they grow. So like, again, like just going, because it's so funny, like how the timing for this live stream today fits so well with what we were talking about last night with these parents. And one of the things that we were discussing last night was about how we need to be very intentional about the things that we're doing. And I appreciate you, Calvin, so much for being so vulnerable and saying, hey, I do it because, like I used to do it as well as a teacher. Oh my God, yes. Right? It's like we need to check those boxes. We need to be in places. And, it's just one of the things. But once you start being very intentional and understanding, okay, so like this is my objective. This is what I'm doing. But this is what children are getting from it. This is what they're most likely perceiving from all of these actions. We start shifting our attitudes, right? And so one of the things that we did, obviously, was to suggest implementing routines. And sometimes it can be something as simple as just allowing children a few more minutes to do those things so they are not feeling rushed.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I'm also aware that and I'll just speak for myself here, but I feel very, very certain that I'm not the only parent who does this, but I will outsource the blame of a rushed situation to my children for moving too slow when it's like, yeah, or Calvin, you packed the day way too full.
Yeah.
Consider this. We were mentioning Allison Schaefer just before we started the live stream, and she has done, I think, such a wonderful job of pointing out that so often parents feel so much pressure to fill up every day full of activities. And we're going to take this sports team and this writing program, and then we're going to go to this cultural event because I want them to be well-rounded. And then, and then we're going to spend 35 minutes, doing some, educational, social emotional learning thing before they go to bed. And so it's just, there's no breathing room in the day.
Yeah. It's exhausting.
Yeah. For parents and for children.
Yeah.
It certainly discourages children, but it also discourages parents where you just feel like, oh my gosh, I can't breathe.
Yeah.
And I'm constantly rushing my kids, and boy, I find myself getting mad at them and angry at them and raising my voice and all these kinds of things. And really, at some point, you kind of have to zoom out and say, am I trying to cram 12 pounds of crap into a 10-pound life? Yeah. And that, I think, then we like scapegoat our children by saying, you're moving too slow. And it's like, no, they're moving too slow. They're moving at the pace that is developmentally appropriate. And we have built a life around them that is completely unreasonable.
Yeah, no, it's so true. And you mentioned power struggles as one of the issues that can kind of come up from kind of this idea of efficiency and productivity and rushing. What are some of the other behavior challenges that might be have a direct correlation with this idea of rushing?
Yeah, well, I'm reminded of Rudolf Dreikers' 4 purposes of misbehavior. Power struggle, are seeking undue power, control.
Oh yeah, mistaken goals. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
But another one, would be attention. For a parent who really, really values being on time, is there any better way to get their attention than to move slowly?
Oh yeah.
I mean, you can get there. And by the way, this is a great little diagnostic tool for parents, okay, to know what your child is up to. If your child is moving slowly and you bark at them or whatever to hurry up, and immediately they speed up with a little smirk on their face, they're doing it for attention. If you bark at them and they move slower, they are looking for control. And so that's an interesting little diagnostic tool. Also, Dreikers mentioned that there is sometimes a goal of revenge, getting even. And this sometimes is what kids are up to. And by the way, I always want to, whenever I mention this mistaken goal, I want to mention that it is not healthy to think of children as these little sociopaths, who are just how to ruin their parents' life. Revenge is a very understandable motivation. And it comes from a place of deep hurt. And so rather than being like, ooh, vengeful little child, we need to look at it and say, ooh, hurt little child. What is going on here, right? Or and then the last one that Dreikers mentioned is what he called a display of inadequacy. And the way that I've found to describe this is that it's a way of acting that communicates to other people, I can't do it. And so here are your choices. You can do it for me, or you can at least relieve me of the responsibility of doing it. And so if it's moving quickly, a child can't just say, gosh, I can't do it. And so you're going to have to pick me up and carry me. You're going to have to come pick me up in the car on the way to the thing. And I'm going to show you over and over that I can't handle this responsibility. And so you have to handle it for me. So those are, I think, the things that come to mind straight away. But I can also imagine that we could think of other reasons that kids are moving too slow for an adult. And then there's a yucky dynamic that develops.
I can't help but notice how, like how the space has such a huge impact in the way that we lead our lives, in the way that we build our routines. And by the space, I mean, like the physical space, but also, like our calendar. So like when you were talking about, like how parents try to squeeze 1,700 activities in like 6 days a week, right? Plus full-time, like schooling. It's like, how does this even happen? How can this become something healthy for the child, right? Because we all know how unstructured playtime is so important, and how just feeling bored, everyone, it's okay. It's okay.
Yeah. And you don't have to entertain your child every
second. Yes, thank you. You don't have to entertain your child 24/7. It's fine for them to just have some time for themselves to relax and just kind of like re-energize as well, right? So it's funny. Oh, sorry. I'll just.
Yeah. No, finish.
So yeah, it's interesting because here in the UK, Calvin, it happens the same. I work with so many families whose calendar is just crazy, absolutely crazy. And oftentimes I have to kind of like work with them in a way that it's like, can we just prioritize which activities are really, really the most important ones? Because you're not giving yourselves a breather, you're not giving your children a breather. And no wonder these children, they grow up, like feeling anxious all the time and not really knowing what to do when they have free time in their hands. And then they get their phones and start scrolling, right? Because they were never given the opportunity to work with free time in their hands.
That's right.
Right?
Yeah.
So if I was someone listening now, I'd be like, right, I need some strategies. Like, what are some concrete tools I can use to kind of not only slow myself down, but kind of have the mindset of looking at my child differently? Like, what would you suggest, Calvin? What could a parent listening today who is resonating with this and does feel rushed and is thinking, well, I've got to get out to work and I've got to do this and I've got to do that. What can we do to kind of slow ourselves down?
So I want to kind of offer some strategies in phases. And the first phase I would say is we need to have a strategy for when we fail. Okay. So for instance, I raise my voice at my children, urging them to hurry up. I call upon my anger and put it out in front of my kids. And here is it's so easy to justify our anger towards kids by saying, well, I'm just trying to look out for them, or something like that.
Yeah.
And here's the reality. When we show anger to our kids, we're trying to frighten them into doing what we want. That is the reality. And it doesn't feel good to admit that. And actually, that's kind of good that it doesn't feel good to admit that. And so a first strategy is learn how to apologize to your children when you are rushing them, whether you raise your voice or whether you don't, to circle up with them later or in the moment and to say, hey, kiddo, I'm trying to push you around and make you go really fast. And I'm acting as if you should go at a certain pace. And that's really unreasonable. I'm really sorry. I'm going to try and find another way to be helpful to you and encouraging to you here. So I think learning to apologize is a big thing. So that's kind of phase one. Phase two would be, okay, let's talk about preventative measures.
Mm.
And this would be, hey, look at your schedule in a really, I don't mean critical in like a negative way, but with a critical eye to say, is this too full? Like, do we have too much going on?
Calendar clutter is real.
It's totally real. And
Yeah.
so decluttering is decluttering the calendar, to borrow your phrase there, is super important as a preventative measure. I think also just, I sometimes talk about it as having a long runway of like, listen, if we need to leave at 3:30, realistically, we don't need to be doing anything after 3. You know, like I don't need to be trying to cram in, you know, a few quick chores or shoot off a few more emails or whatever. Why don't we just take half an hour? Like, you know, and that will vary, of course, by the developmental age of your child. But I think having long runways is a big thing. Okay, so that's maybe another phase of just thinking preventatively. And then there's also just kind of the in the moment stuff. One tactic that I think is wildly underutilized is just the parent needs to just focus on how fast they're moving. Like, so in other words, if we're, you know, if the kids are playing at the park and it's time to go, you know, like we do have somewhere to be, even if the counter's not very cluttered, and it's time to go. Well, I can sit there and bark at the kids for 10 minutes, telling them that we got to go and to get out the playground equipment. Or I could just tell them one time and then get moving toward the car, you know.
Don't talk, right?
That's right. And it's not like about abandoning your kids. Like, of course, out of the very, very far corner of your eye, you know where they are and you know that they're safe and things like that. But at the end of the day, you just get your butt moving. And kids often, this amazing thing where, like, if you will just go, they will come. And that's not every situation always, but come on, that's the low-hanging fruit and the much underutilized strategy to get kids moving, instead of talking. Rudolf Dreikers once told a parent, he said, everything would be solved if you would just shut your mouth. You know, stop talking and move.
Shut up and do it.
Yeah.
So I, you know, of course we could come up with more, but I think those are the things that come to mind straight away and are going to be most applicable to the most situations. Every situation is different, but that's a good overview.
Yeah.
I love, you know what, Calvin, again, it's almost like we're doing like a little promo here, like for the Empowered Parenting course, because literally all the strategies that you're sharing with us today, and everyone, this was not planned, okay? Like, we didn't know that Calvin was actually going to talk about these strategies, but literally all of them, we present these strategies to parents in the Empowered Parenting course, which is amazing, especially, you know, like repairing when you make a mistake, learning how to repair. That's brilliant. And you know, like we work on it, and preventative measures. I mean, like even family meetings, they can become such a wonderful time for you to focus on solutions and just work with that child or with the children in your lives. How can we prevent this from happening?
We were doing this activity last night, Calvin, and it's all about this little girl called Serena, who's about 8 years old. And the idea was to demonstrate to parents the difference between kind of badly kind of designed consequences, which can sometimes be like punishment.
Logical consequences.
And the idea of solutions. And Serena's issue was that she was making her family late every day. She couldn't get out of bed on time. She was just delaying, you know, all the rest of it. So we asked the parents to come up with a list of consequences, like what should we do to teach Serena a lesson? And then we looked at the solutions, you know, which were obviously like helpful ways to get, you know, her kind of moving out the door. And it's amazing that kind of that mindset shift of, well, what can we do to help this child, you know? That was really interesting.
You know, it's really interesting that you mentioned that. I live in a country and a culture that really thinks of justice in this very retributive way, you know, of like, people do bad, they need to be punished, and
You
then
have
always
to be great.
and this is how people change. And of course, you know, you need look no further than our recidivism rates in our criminal justice system to see that it doesn't work, right? I mean, like, it does not work. And so when we shift to a kind of restorative justice, which actually, I don't know how familiar you are with restorative justice movement.
Very.
Super,
Yeah.
super cool. But it's much more solution focused of, hey, we've got a problem. Let's solve this together.
Yeah.
It's not overlooking wrongdoing. It's not overlooking problems. It's not permissive parenting. If this solution focused approach, but it is collaborative, it is cooperative, and it's not about a power hierarchy where parent or adult or teacher, whoever sits at the top and doles out all the punishments to the people below so that they do the right things.
Yeah, and and that's actually ties in really well with, you know, like whenever we present logical consequences and what are basically like the criteria for a consequence to actually be logical in the positive discipline lens is the 3 R's and a H, right? So it's like, is it related? Is it reasonable? Is it respectful? And is it helpful? So if you think about restorative justice, it checks all the boxes.
All those boxes. Really cool.
Yes. So isn't it funny how like we think, oh, you know, like, but positive discipline, and like, you know, obviously as we know, like positive discipline comes from the Adlerian psychology, but people usually think positive discipline is only for young children. But then if you think about like restorative justice, right, it's for like fully grown people, and it still relates so much to these principles as well.
And again, the positive discipline in the workplace, whole themed, you know, I mean, we always say, don't we, Lucy, that, you know, these tools that you're going to learn, like, you can use with, you know, your co-workers,
with a partner.
In our private practice here in South Carolina, we have other therapists in the practice. And although my business partner and I, we started the practice, we don't say that people work for us. They work with us. And we could say, oh, that's just a little linguistic thing to show off our Adlerian nature. It's like,
how kind we are.
We really think of it that way, though, right? That it's like we don't sit at the top of a hierarchy. We have role. There are differences in our roles, but not in our value, not in our belongingness to the group. And we don't think of it as above and below. It's, hey, we are trying to do something as a group, and we divvy up responsibilities and roles, but we're all working toward the same thing. We're on a team here.
I think that's really interesting about the permissive style of parenting as well. Like you were saying about the hierarchy, where with the kind of more authoritarian, where it's, you know, parent and child, when we're permissive, it's almost like the other way around. It's child and parent. So it's still with, you know, obviously what we're trying to do is get the kind of, you know, the balance and the equality.
That's right. Permissive parenting is just as autocratic as authoritarian parenting. It's just that you set up the child as the tyrant, which is a horrible curse to give a child, you know, to say, here's all this responsibility for deciding everything about our life. That's an enormous burden, and you know, heavy lies the crown, so to speak. A tyrant is not a wonderful thing to be.
No, and it really does feel very heavy for a child. And it's funny because like yesterday I was working with these their sisters, and one of them is 14, the other one is 16, and we went out to IKEA to do a little bit of shopping for their bedrooms. And then the oldest sister, she comes to the youngest sister because the oldest, she loves cooking, she's going to college to become a chef, and then she says, like, what would you like for dinner? And it was like the three of us just sitting down around the table having tea. And she was like, what would you like for dinner? And then she was like, I don't know. It's like, you know, it's such a broad question. And she's 14, right? And then I told her, like, why don't you give her like 3 options? And then she comes up with these 3 options. And like we play a little game. I'm like, wait, don't answer yet. I'm gonna try and read your minds. And when she gives the 3 options, I'm like, okay, so I think she's going to want this. And that's just like, oh my God, you're so right. So like once you've got options in your hands, right? Instead of having like that huge broad question, you've got limited options, and then you know. And then it doesn't feel so burdensome, does it? And
When
again,
my
it's
when
like
my
it's not
son
a
was
young child, is it?
exactly when my son was 3, just a funny story about this. When he was 3, my mother came to watch him and his little sister for a while, and my mom says, Truman, what do you want for dinner? And he looks up at her as a 3-year-old and says, what are my options?
Ah,
Yeah, so wise.
I love that.
So much.
So wise. Can you imagine like going to a restaurant with a blank menu?
My gosh.
How
Yeah.
overwhelming that would be.
Yeah,
I
that
love
would be
going
scary.
to places when there's like 3 options.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is. It's exactly
What
right.
was
It's
it
like
saying?
going for the blank menu. Yeah.
That's
Can
right.
you imagine? Because that's what it must feel like for a child who lives in a highly permissive home.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
going to a restaurant with a blank menu.
That's
Right?
right.
And but at the same time, so that is from the child's perspective, right? But what do you think, Calvin, are like the parents' perspective when they're being super permissive? Because I really want this to come from you, Calvin, because right now, hopefully, so many parents, they're going to have like that moment when the penny drops.
Well, I'm always trying to give like when I work with my clients in a more clinical setting, I do what we call giving respect to the symptoms before we try to change them. And so I want us to think for a moment about the wisdom of permissive parenting. Now, I'm not an advocate of permissive parenting, but I think a lot of what I see in permissive parents, sometimes it's that they were raised in an intensely authoritarian environment, and they made a promise to themselves as a
One
kid,
the other way.
I'm never going to do that to my kids. And so
Yeah.
they flip. And in theology, they have this word, polemical. I don't know if you all know this word, but it's this idea of kind of, you've got something wrong in one direction with a certain amount of strength. And so then you create what's called a polemic, which is, opposite opinion with equal strength, right? And so
It's like physics, isn't it?
that's
Yes.
right. That's right. And so, so I think there's a lot of that, Frank Walton, who was my mentor for many years, he's retired now. My friend and mentor developed this technique called the most memorable observation. And he would ask parents, hey, when you were 12, 13, somewhere in there, you started to make some big picture observations about your family. Like my family works such and such a way, and I either love it or hate it. So as you think back, what was the most memorable observation that you made about your family? And what he found is that whatever the parent answers is rather predictive of their parenting style with their kids. And so, some people say, oh my gosh, we were always late. So you know what they're always doing? Rushing their kids. We're going to be on time, or, oh, we were always together as a family. I love that. When I have family of my own, I want to always be together. Well, they're very clingy with their kids and bothered when they go spend time with friends as adolescents. And anyway, so, I think people are sometimes permissive. No, they're always permissive for very understandable reasons.
And always coming from a place of a lot of love.
Yeah, always. And so I think we can start with a place of respect for it. But I think there's also this thing, Frank also gave me this great phrase that what we guard against, we invite. And so when you guard against, oh, I don't want us to be, spread out and not have togetherness, and so I'm going to guard against that. Well, then you get clingy, and you know what your kids want to do when you're clingy? They want to go away. They don't want to be around you. When you're constantly rushing your kids don't like being made to do things, and so they're going to slow down, and you're going to be late. And so there is this awareness of sometimes the things that we are trying so hard to protect against, whatever that is, out of love, out of or out of woundedness inside of ourselves, right? Sometimes then we paradoxically invite that into our lives and make our lives more difficult. And so that's kind of my take on that. I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, no, very
Thank
helpful.
you, Calvin. Yes, I always tell people, look, everything we do comes from a place of love.
Yeah.
There's no parents, there's no one, like, hopefully there's no one out there who's not doing something out of love. And, like, sometimes it doesn't come across as loving. But definitely, it's like, like as parents and educators and carers for these children, it's like there's so many things that we do that we go like, oh my God, why did I do this? And then if you look back, you go like, no, I did this out of love, but it just didn't look like it.
Yeah, but that's what I love about the repair and the because actually, like when we do the two lists activities, we do the list of stressors and then the list of life skills. What do parents really want for their children when they're young adults? And it's kind of like adding mistakes or opportunities to learn to that life skill list, so that even on a bad day you can still model, whether you shout or you hurry or and that's what I love, because I think that is one of the most amazing things that we want for our children, is to be able to understand that learning is from mistakes, and that repair is going to be the center of any relationship, but you kind of come apart and then you repair and then you're closer for it. And
that's right. I mentioned Paul Rasmussen earlier. He told me one time, he said, there's no such thing as a perfect parent. And if there were, they would be terrible parents.
Yeah.
I said, well, what do you mean by that?
They would be so frustrated.
It's like perfect parents don't adequately prepare their child for the realities of life. Some of which is we're not perfect. And hey, also, that is not a catastrophe. Not being perfect is not a death sentence. What can happen is when you confront your imperfection, you can own it, you can take responsibility, and you can repair. And perfect parents they would never be able to model this,
because they wouldn't be aware of anything that wasn't perfect. So,
and bless those children who look up to these perfect parents and try to be just as perfect.
Yeah. And can you imagine the tyranny of that, of trying to be perfect?
Yeah. So that is so enlightening, Calvin. I'm just
it's very true. I think I was trying to tell that to the group of parents yesterday, like, don't try and be perfect, because your kids don't need perfect parents at all. So Calvin, is there anything, before we kind of wrap up, is there anything else on the topic of kind of rushing and efficiency that you would like to kind of leave with our listeners?
Yeah, I think this as well. I think that and you were mentioning earlier about, what are the messages that are getting communicated to children. And one of them also is that speed is good. And I'm thinking, boy, I'm name dropping all these people today, but it's because I want to give them credit for these wonderful ideas that they passed.
Bring it on, Calvin. We love a name drop.
There's a marvelous therapist named Wes Winget from Nebraska.
He's so good. Yes.
Oh,
I know him. He's great.
And has been so, I think, helpful to me, both just on a personal and professional level. But he often will tell young therapists that he trains a lot of folks. He'll tell them, slow down to get somewhere. And that's relative to therapy, right? That young counselors, inexperienced counselors in particular, they want to rush. They're like, oh my gosh, how quickly can I figure this case out, and how quickly can we teach them this skill? And he's just slow down to get somewhere. You have to slow down. And I think that, I'm living in a culture and a society and a historical moment right now that is characterized by speed. And in many ways, that's okay. It's kind of like I'm going to Boise soon, and it's nice that it's not going to take me 4.5 weeks to get there by wagon. I'm grateful for jet engines that can get me there quickly. but also, speed is not synonymous with good either. And sometimes slow is better. And like, actually, a lot of times slow is better. And I think we also just need to be aware that we need to somehow model to our children that sometimes speed is good and sometimes speed is not. And when we are constantly rushing them, they're only getting half of that equation. They're getting an incomplete truth, which really most of the time is the same thing as a lie.
Can you just said that to me, and I was thinking, can you think of like any mindfulness activity that is like super quick?
Yeah, I mean,
let's do like super fast yoga.
It's like doing the box breath, but only one breath in, one breath out.
Yeah. That's a recipe for a panic attack.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like your nervous system is saying, hello, there's something very wrong with you right now.
That's right. Yeah.
Talking of yoga, I remember one of my yoga therapists said to me, try walking 10% slower. And it was really interesting to try to actually be aware of the pace you're walking and actually try and slow it down by 10%. It was very hard.
Now, see, that's a step too far. I'm a fast walker.
1% is 1%.
Yeah, 10% is quite a lot.
That's right. Yeah.
But the thing, I think the beauty is just about me being very, very intentional and being very mindful of these things, right? Because if we don't talk about this, we won't be able to understand the importance of just slowing down. And again, it's like it just walks hand in hand with the whole Montessori philosophy.
Yeah.
So, like to everyone out there, if you guys are watching this and you're like, oh, but my children don't go to a Montessori school. They don't have to go to a Montessori school for you to live a Montessori lifestyle.
That's right.
Right. And slowing down. And again, it's just like listening to that natural pace of yours.
Yeah.
That is so, so powerful. And it can change your whole day 100%. So
yeah.
Thank you so much, Calvin, for like this really
thank you so much.
Walk. And I loved it. I think there's so many wonderful takeaways that families can take, and educators and everyone who cares for children in. So
and where can we find out more about you, Calvin? Obviously, I've done a bit of stalking, but tell our audience where they can discover you.
Yeah, so my website is travelersrestcounseling.com. And by the way, in the US, we use 1L for travelers, 1L for counseling.
True. And here in the UK is 2.
It's just an FYI. So travelersrestcounseling.com. And there we have a resources page, a tab there, and there's a whole bunch of things that are there that will direct you in a whole bunch of different directions. I have a podcast and a YouTube channel. And
the YouTube channel, I love it.
It's like really fun. It's a little like 15, 20-minute videos, very accessible, made for everybody. So that'll get you pointed in a bunch of different directions where you can connect with me, and I would love to connect with folks. I'm always receptive to folks reaching out by email or through social media. Love to be connected and make friends with folks.
Fantastic, Calvin. And what's the name of your podcast?
It's called Picayune Conversations. Picayune is this word. It just means like a little throwaway.
Okay.
So they're just, short, sweet, to the point.
Yeah. And very fun as well. It's very light.
They're a lot of fun.
Yeah. That's really cool. Well, Calvin, thank you once again so very much for coming to the live stream. We're just
wonderful to meet you.
With everything that we've discussed. So thank you so very much. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. I'm there in South Carolina. And we'll see you guys in 2 weeks' time. And we wish you a wonderful rest of your week. And see you then. Bye for now.
Bye.